We are Team Monroe, consisting of Rasmeen Jumra, Jessica Sparrow, Sherry-Ive Mitchell, Dustin Brenniger, and Richard Wingard, and this is our software testing project on debugging. A few software debugging key terms that we will use are debugging, which is identifying and removing errors from computer software. Syntax error, which are characters or strings placed incorrectly that cause failures within a program's execution. An example would be a missing semicolon. Logic error, which produce unintended output depending on a program's behavior. An example would be when Boolean operators are incorrectly used. And database testing, which tests database functions, triggers, and commands. The code design of our program allows the user to add and delete students to and from a database using their names, ID number, and email. The user can search the database using the same criteria to access their grades. The grades can also be entered and changed. The user interface consists of a main menu that gives the user the options of adding or searching students. The Add Students menu prompts the user to enter the student's information, then asks if they want to add another student. If N is entered, it returns to the main menu. The Search Students menu asks how the user wants to search for the student, then prompts for the user input. Once the student is located, it shows their information and grades, and the Student menu, which asks the user if they want to update the grade, delete the student, or return to the main menu. The Delete Student menu verifies that user wants to delete the student, to prevent user errors. And finally, the Student Grade menu asks the user which grade they wish to change. It also gives the option of returning to the student or main menu. In order to ensure proper software testing, we seeded faults into our own program and documented those errors. These faults include primarily logic errors, which are the hardest to debug, some syntax errors, some declaration errors. Our main file contained 21 errors, our class file contained 5 errors, and our header file contained 3 errors. We received a program that was loaded with faults, and in order to make sure that the program functioned properly, we had to debug the program and then test it. We initially compiled a couple of times and saw what compiler errors were being reported and then fixed those. We created a document to keep track of those errors as we went through. Once the compiler errors were fixed, there were still runtime errors we had to debug. Utilizing the comments provided by the programmers, we removed the logical errors. The types of errors and faults we found included syntax errors, such as asterisks in place of periods, invalid tokens, which are invalid characters that the compiler does not recognize. We had about 600 of these errors. A Greek letter that resembled a semicolon was found and had to be replaced. Logical errors were also found. Database entry errors, which were segmentation faults that accessed data structures out of range. The code also wouldn't store data. There were about 41 lines containing faults that were seeded in. Initially, we attempted to run the code and the terminal outputted compilation errors. We worked through line by line fixing whatever errors arose during the compilation. After the code compiled, we were able to reach the menus of the program and test to see if there were any runtime errors. We manually stepped through the code to find the segmentation faults. We tested the code's execution in order to properly debug. We entered test values into the code and went as far as we could until we reached an error. Each error reached required us to pinpoint what exactly was being executed and why it produced an error. After debugging the compilation and runtime errors, we finally had a working product. We finished testing the code by providing the program with test inputs and making sure that the program performed correctly. We had a positive experience working together with great communication and organization. All meetings were conducted virtually with Google Hangouts. We maintained all files and versions on Google Drive and had a list of found errors and corrected errors.